Ataturk had changed the dress code, so he went back to Turkey and found this westernized system.
The presence of leadership, or its absence, makes a difference in process and outcomes. To successfully turn a Muslim nation into a Western parliamentary democracy, secular state.
Good evening, dear guests, and welcome to this evening's event, sponsored by the Atatürk Society of America. I'm Tijan Baydurarak. I serve as the secretary on the board. As you know, November 10th is the 73rd year anniversary of Atatürk's death, and we are honored that you came to join us in commemorating Atatürk, his incredible life and accomplishments. I will introduce a man who has been described as a modern-day Renaissance man due to his talents in the fields of art, science, and humanities. By profession, he's a professor of physics. He has taught at universities such as Oxford, Mary Washington, and Princeton. He has many publications in physics. By hobby, he's an artist and an art historian, his favorite subject being Leonardo da Vinci. He has authored 2 books called The Math and the Mona Lisa and Leonardo's Universe. And by heart, he's the president of the Atatürk Society of America. Please welcome Dr. Bulent Atalay.
Thank you very much, Tijan. Thank you for coming. This is an evening to celebrate Atatürk and Austin Bey, who has written a superb book on Atatürk. This is the book. It turns out I'm actually, my family came about because Atatürk was an intermediary in my parents' wedding. So I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Atatürk. In my own family, there was an idolatrous admiration and affection for Atatürk. There were pictures all around the house, but I didn't know any of the connections until one day in 1967, when I was just beginning my teaching career. We were driving down the Gallipoli Peninsula with my father, who was a general at the time, and he told us the story. Now, this is the house of Ataturk. Most Turks here would recognize that house from pictures. I had always wanted to see it. In 2006, when I was giving lectures on a cruise, I actually got to see it. We went to the house, and the house is on the street where my grandfather, Ismail Hakkı, and he had grown up. They were both born in 1881. They played soccer on the streets. They played soccer on the streets of Thessalonica. They went to the same schools. They got into trouble together. And I found out from Austin Bey's book, they were arrested together. They went to jail together. I knew nothing about this. And my father didn't know anything about this. Unfortunately, I can't tell him because my father's own experience is from one day after a campaign, the Gallipoli campaign in 1916, seeing his own father. And then his father went off to fight against the British, and their, quote, recalcitrant leader, he was killed fighting against Lawrence of Arabia. So Lawrence of Arabia is no hero in my family. It was a long drive, but the most mesmerizing story. Now, I'll come back to that in just a minute. 4 or 5 years ago, I was working on a book on Leonardo, Math and the Mona Lisa, and behind me, the television set was set on C-SPAN, and being interviewed was Arnold Ludwig. This is Arnold Ludwig. We had him down for the Atatürk Society's meeting. He gave a talk to the Atatürk Society in Washington. Arnold Ludwig had published this book called The King of the Mountain. He's a distinguished psychiatrist. He had spent 18 years studying the structure and the architecture of leadership. He looked at the great leaders of the past like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, George Washington, and based on their achievements, he set up a scale of 11 criteria. Now, nobody could get all of the points because some of them were military leaders, others were lawmakers, others were in office for a very long time. He looked at something like, first of all, after setting up his criteria, he looked at all the leaders of the 20th century. He called it a Baker's century of 101 years. And it turns out there are 2,300 leaders in this time, but 377 of them have the most amount of information. Those are the ones he ranked. The criteria, I don't know if you can read these, but something from nothing. The Ottoman Empire had died, and from its smoldering ruins, the Republic of Turkey was established. More than before. 0 to 3, he would get a 3. We graded Ataturk on the scale, and we graded George W. Bush. This was just before the last election, so George Bush was president. Last week, on Thursday, I was at Penn State. Penn State, of course, was embroiled in this devastating scandal, but I gave a talk, and I gave the test also to the audience there. This time we rated Ataturk, and we ranked Obama according to these criteria. Now, 37 points is the highest you can get on the scale. These are people who got the lowest on this, in the ranking. In my lifetime, I remember Samuel Doe, I think he was Sergeant Doe, and down at the bottom, Kim Campbell, who a female Prime Minister of Canada who reigned for 132 days. They got very low scores. Now, Ataturk's reforms. Now, most of us talk about his great military prowess, but the truth is the reforms are far more important because, after all, in this set, it's only 0 to 3 points. But where do the other points come from? But it was Ataturk's name that came up that perked me up. I jumped up when I heard him. The interviewer said, "Did you know that Ataturk would rank like this, an atmospheric rank?" And he said, "I really did not know. I simply factored in all, I put in all the input into the computer, and the computer generated the answers." These are the top 21 scorers, I should say, but they're in alphabetical order. The fact that Ataturk appears at the top is because his name starts with A. And down at the bottom is Woodrow Wilson. The type of leaders they were, 2, 4, 2, etc. The code is at the top. Democratically elected would be 5, visionary would be 2, etc. And the year that they started their reign. How long they reigned or stayed in office is important. The size of the population is important. Not only that, but Arnold Ludwig found a way to, he claimed, to factor out what we would consider the evil factor. As a matter of fact, growing up, I regarded half the people on his list as people who were my enemies. Castro, Hitler, Mao Zedong, Stalin were all my enemies. They're on the list because they represent the influence they had on their own countries. Then, in blue are the people who rank the highest. Ataturk, type of ruler, that's 2, that's a visionary. Down here, Mao Zedong and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who got 30 points out of 37. That's really reaching asymptotically at the very top. And there's Ataturk. He's off the scale. He gets 31 on Arnold Ludwig's ranking. And he said he really didn't know that Ataturk would rank so high. Now, Arnold Ludwig and I have become good friends. He teaches at the Brown Medical School, Brown University Medical School. He was at the University of Kentucky for a very long time.